AWS Loft Talks.
I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panel here. I'll start with Charlie. Charlie O'Donnell is the founding partner, Brooklyn Bridge Ventures. Actually, he may or may not remember this, but I pitched him in 2009. And so there's an old saying, if you want money, ask for advice, and if you want advice, ask for money. I pitched Charlie in 2009, and he wisely gave me advice. But Charlie has been a founder, a venture capitalist, and done a bunch of stuff. Charlie, if you can, why don't you take us through how you floated between venture and founding companies and working with startups and the kind of things that you look at, the kind of sectors and companies you invest in now.
Sure. So I think I've done the whole VC stack, which is I used to fund funds. So no one ever thinks of VCs as needing to pitch for money, but we need to pitch as well. So I used to work at the General Motors pension fund, investing in VCs. They would come and pitch their funds, and we'd fund them every 4 years. And then I joined Union Square Ventures as their first analyst about 10 years ago. After that, I worked as a product manager at a portfolio company of theirs and started my own company, which seemed really easy from the investor perspective. We always think we know better. Turns out it's really hard, and I wasn't any good at it. Also, turns out it's really hard to raise venture financing the week that Lehman went under. I was literally in the valley that week, cut my trip short because nothing was going to happen. And then came back to the venture side to help First Round Capital launch their office in New York, and then became a founder all over again, but this time in a space that I knew a lot better, venture capital, and started my firm, Brooklyn Bridge Ventures, in 2012. We're just about to wrap up our first fund and finish up raising the second, which will start next year. Basically, I invest in things that are stupidly early. I've done pre-product. I haven't done pre-founder yet, but I'm open. And New York only. We have about 25 investments in the portfolio. Basically, my cutoff is if the company has already raised $750,000 in a previous round, it's too late. So I want to be there to help you spend your first $1 million or whatever it is that you're raising. It's a pretty diverse group of companies. I've done some hardware startups. I led the seed round of Canary, which you may have seen all over the subways. Maybe there's one in your house. I've done some mobile startups, and I'm about to do my first 2 retail rollouts, like bricks and mortar, no tech. We're not going to convince us that it's tech. Yeah, no, physical store, like, places. So it's really kind of all over the board, and I like learning about new spaces.
Next, 2 down from Charlie, we have Gil Beyda. Gil and I actually sort of worked together at Comcast Ventures. I actually pitched Gil my first company in 2008. He'd only been a venture capitalist for a year at that point, I think.
Not even. That was my first year.
Yet wisely decided not to invest in my first company.
Was I kind to you?
You're very kind. Very kind. No, you were kind too.
I worry about that.
Previously, Gil had started Real Media, which was acquired. He was the CTO of Dakota, which was acquired. His first 2 venture investments, first 2 were acquired. So why don't you take us through the magic of what you do and how everything you touch is acquired and the kind of sectors and companies you're interested in now?
Luck. That is my number one principle. So just to back up a bit, I was an engineer for 10 years. I ran my own software consulting business, writing kernel level code and also application level code. Then in 1995 was a co-founder, CTO of Real Media, one of the first online ad networks. That was sold in 2001, and then jumped on board with my co-founder again in Dakota, which is behavioral targeted ad network. And it's funny because my family doesn't really know what I do, and so I just said, I do pop-ups, right? And so, oh yeah, pop-ups, I know pop-ups. Well, we didn't do pop-ups. And then, so Dakota was acquired in '07, and then in '08, I decided to move over to the venture side and formed Genacast in partnership with Comcast, which is kind of an odd formation, but Comcast has an internal fund where they do 2 to 20 million size investments, later stage Series A and beyond. And for me, that wasn't interesting. It wasn't risky enough. It was, the clay was hardened by then. So we both got together and formed Genacast, both contributed capital, so I'm an investor in the fund as well, to do the seed stage, non-strategic, mostly B2B tech investments, where we'll put in, are going to check up to $1 million. And these companies we invest in don't have to have anything to do with Comcast or NBC Universal, but certainly if there's that potential, I work closely with those guys and can open those doors and make those intros. And you're right, I got lucky. My first investment was acquired by Google in 2 years. My second investment was acquired by Adobe. My fourth investment was also acquired by Google. But it's just luck. I mean, it's just dumb luck at this point.
And to Gil's right, we have Angela Lee from 37 Angels. Angela and I only recently met, so she hasn't yet had the opportunity to turn down investing in any of my ideas. 37 Angels is a community of women who invest in early stage companies. But why don't you tell us a little about 37 Angels, yourself, and the kind of companies and sectors you're looking at?
Sure. So one clarification I always have to make is that we invest in male and female-led startups. We don't only invest in female founders. We are seed stage. We'll usually write a check of between $50,000 and $200,000. Sector agnostic. We've invested in 33 companies to date. And I've also been on the other side of this. So I've bootstrapped 3 startups and raised external funding for one of them. One of the companies was actually a competitor to Charlie's company. And we also had a difficult time raising funding because it was 2008.
Oh, cool. Never happening again. Yeah, and so last but certainly not least, even though he came last, is Matt Hartman from Betaworks. I actually met Matt when he was helping build Hot Potato. For those of you who don't remember, Hot Potato was a hot New York startup, no pun intended. It actually competed with my second company. Hot Potato was acquired by Facebook. My second company was not. No. I most certainly did not. But Matt's a founder, a hacker, a developer, a tinkerer, an investor, and he's at Betaworks now. And one of the Betaworks website no longer says this, but it used to say, "We are not an investment fund. Here's our portfolio." So why don't you tell us a little bit about what Betaworks is and how you guys think about seed investing?
So at Betaworks, we do kind of 2 things. Our main business is we have what we call the studio, where we build companies from scratch. So we'll hire a few developers, each working on their own kind of project together, so they don't come in with ideas. We're hiring them as Betaworks employees. We launch products. They're usually full stack developers, and so they build things, and we have kind of data scientists and brand people and hackers kind of at our topco. And as some of the companies launch and the initial engineer wants to turn it into a company, and we want to turn it into a company, we form a company, we co-found it with them. So do you guys play the game Dots, or have you ever sent an animated GIF ever? We started a company called
Or if
Giphy.
you've used the internet for Chartbeat.
So those companies were early on. They were a company called Bitly, which is a link shortener. Chartbeat, which is a publisher tool to measure real-time data. More recently, a company called Dots, which is a mobile game that has about 60 million downloads. An animated search engine called Giphy that's very popular in sort of direct traffic, but also is I think one of the more popular Slack integrations. I guess that's productivity. I'm not sure. So we build stuff, and then the second thing we do is we make seed investments, and that's what I work on. So we build about 3 to 7 companies a year, and we seed invest in about 20 companies, 15 to 20 companies a year. And our focus in both is on consumer-facing companies, social products that are sort of fundamentally engineering and data-driven. And so we've done that for the last 6 years. I joined about 2 years ago, and before that I'd been at a programmer, and then I was at a company called Hot Potato, and then I started a company that wasn't venture-backed in the real estate space and started lots of different projects. Some of them worked better than others, and ended up on the seed investment side now for about 2 years. And
So the first thing you need to do when you're raising venture capital is actually, or raising any kind of funding, is actually get access to capital. Can you guys talk a little bit about, let's start with Charlie, can you talk a little bit about, aside from being an event like this, how you actually get access to an angel investor, find access to a venture capitalist, find people, find out where the money's at?
Sure. I don't actually think it's that hard. I mean, I have a pretty full inbox, so it may be hard to get me to respond like today, but at some point, I will. And I think investors are becoming more and more accessible, particularly in New York, because most founders here don't have the kind of pedigree that West Coast founders do. Right? On the West Coast, you come to expect that the teams you back, just ran an important business for Amazon or spun out of Facebook, and they were the original team here. But like great startups kind of fall out of the sky here in New York. Like we're all still pretty new at this. So I think early stage investors can't afford to be dismissive of teams that are first time founders. I know in my fund, out of the 25 investments that we've made, 23 of them have never run a venture-backed company before. So I kind of got to be accessible and open. I think the two ways I would recommend that people improve their chances of getting access to funding is one, be the expert in your category, right? So when one of my portfolio companies just announced a $30 million raise, Orchard, which is a fintech company, but Matt started the P2P fintech meetup. And it's easy to think that like, well, it's just a meetup, who cares? But they were super early to the space of tools in and around, the P2P platforms. They wanted to build up their network and credentials. And so by becoming well networked in that space, it wasn't accidental that they would like bump into people who were investors. So they sort of centered themselves in that community. The other way is figure out like, who would I go to due diligence you? So if you're building some platform that improves monetization for publishers, let's say. Well, when I was at First Round, I led our investment in Refinery 29. So if you're pitching me to say like, oh, we help publishers invest money, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reach out to the Refinery 29 founders. I'm going to completely bastardize your pitch, right? This team came in and they do this thing with some premium inventory, and they're going to be like, this doesn't sound like anything we would use, and I'll come back to you and be like, they weren't that interested, so I'm probably not that interested. It'd be much better if you went to them first, and I heard through in my network, hey, Charlie, by the way, somebody pitched us as a client, and they are totally spot on in terms of what we need, and you should really take a look at funding them because they're just an engineer away from building, and they totally have the right, the right insight. So customers can be obviously a great source of funding with real revenues, but also a great source of introductions because it's our job to know who the main customers are in the space, and we're talking to them all the time about who they see.
Gil, you've got a $200 billion company behind you, sort of, next to you?
I think it's only 150 billion. The market's gone down.
We'll talk about the contraction later. But so you've got a $100 to $200 billion company. Can you talk about that as a source of deal flow, or if there's somebody here and they're not actually selling, multi-million-dollar license to some unit of Comcast, NBC Universal, how do they find you?
So last year I saw, I think 800 deals, and I think maybe 5 came from Comcast, right? And so you figure, look, they're off doing business, whatever they do, and their job isn't really to identify startups, for me. But look, if one does come in, I'm going to take it seriously.
Where those 795 come from?
They mostly came from my network. The highest quality ones came from my network. So ask yourself this question here. If you're selling a product, right, how do you find your customers, right? It's the same way as you find your investors. We're just a different type of customer. We're not buying your product, we're buying your stock. And if you can't find a warm way to get an introduction to me, or through my portfolio company or somebody I know or trust, or through David or whoever, right, then that's sort of an indication that, given that we do mostly B2B, that maybe this person might have trouble finding their customers who actually don't want to be found. They're hidden within some organization. If they can't find me, guess my email address, right? Or look on LinkedIn and see who I'm friends with, and they can't find me. Maybe that's an indicator. So it's not a high bar, but it's somewhat of a bar to say that to make you stand out from everybody else. So Gil@Genacast.com. Okay, there you go. And if you spell it either way, I'm going to get it. But it would be nice to say, hey, I saw you, and don't take the word for it, but hey, I saw you at the AWS. I thought you said something really interesting about blah, blah, blah. My company is related to your portfolio company, such and so. I know him. We went to school together. Don't lie. Or something like that. So make it seem like not, dear Genacast, we're going to be $1 billion company. Here are the wiring instructions, right? So it'll be, yeah.
If only that had worked, I would have done it.
Right.
But Angela, can you talk about 37 Angels process?
Sure. So anybody can apply to us off of Gust. And so we have a very open platform. So in terms of, we see 2,000 to 2,500 deals a year. And I would say 2/3 of them are completely unsolicited, coming in off of Gust, off of our website. People tweet at me. People find my email address. Also because I work at Columbia as my day job, my phone number is publicly listed, so I get cold calls as well. That being said, if I look at our portfolio companies, of our 33 companies, 27 of them came in through an introduction, because that's where the best quality deal flow comes from. And so those are from accelerators that we work with, other investors, our portfolio companies, and we will take a closer look at something that comes in from an introduction that we trust.
Let me guess, Betaworks finds companies through the Betaworks network. Is that right, Matt?
So we do have a lot of people. We have about 100 people in our office, and a lot of them have friends that are building interesting things. So that's definitely one way. We also for our seed investments, our checks are a bit smaller. We're not usually the lead investor. We're usually putting maybe $100,000 into $1 million round, say, and so sometimes it's from other investors who say, particularly understand our focus on these networks of user-generated content and say we think this is a good fit. And we have a type form on the website that's like we actually read a lot of. We look at a lot of stuff, and we'll Skype chat with people, and I think it's. I totally agree that I don't know. It hasn't been that long since I've been on the other side, building things, and I think I had no concept of seeing 2,000 companies, that's a lot of companies per day to just look at and understand what they do. So I think finding these ways to get introduced, some context is often helpful. And I think that one other thing that's I didn't realize to be true is that a lot of investors have very specific focuses. So we'll look at a lot of stuff, and it's actually easy for us sometimes to say, listen, this is totally outside of our scope. But we'll take a look, and I think there's ours is consumer tech that's sort of media focused and user generated content. Other companies, other investors focus on B2B, on enterprise. And so if you're going to spend time kind of trying to get at some of these investors, I think understanding the lens through which way they look at companies and then their area of focus can be useful.
One other thing I'll add too, as a bootstrapped company, I know you're really sensitive about spending any money whatsoever. So when you go to a lawyer, your eyes pop out about how much things can cost. But going to a law firm that regularly does startup deals, there's 4 or 5 law firms in New York that do most of the venture-backed deals. And so while you might think their hourly rate is really expensive, they have all sorts of like ancillary benefits. I can think I'm just about to do my third company that has been introduced to me through Cooley. I'm constantly talking to the teams at Wilson Sonsini and Lowenstein. So dealing with people from a services side that regularly interact with funds can be a benefit and a lot cheaper than other means of getting introductions, even if you think their hourly rates are too high.
I actually want to go back to something Matt brought up, which was you said a lot of, actually you guys all brought up that your the greatest source of your investments is your network. If you guys have had similar experiences to me, you've pitched 1 million people, and a lot of people say, "We love your idea. Just find me, tell me when you've got a lead investor." And so, I wonder if you guys can. I don't know if Betaworks does not lead, correct? Okay.
So what I say with Betaworks is our check size is usually not the biggest, and so when you go to a bigger investor, they're going to renegotiate the terms. And so if they're putting in a check that's 7 times the size of our check, then you should spend time negotiating with them and not waste time thinking about it with us. But we'll commit for something that sort of our equivalent of leading is we'll commit early and introduce you to the people who will hopefully lead.
Yeah. There is a very good reason, we can talk about this in the networking section, but there's a very good reason why investors are looking for other investors to invest in your companies. Gil, Angela, Charlie, can you guys talk about it a little bit? What is your process? You see something and you're like, well, who else is investing? What's it like to take that leap? Where all right, I'm going to suck it up and I'm going to take that leap of faith and invest in this company.
So we lead or co-lead. And so if we say find another lead, we'd never say that. It means that we're not interested. And so a lot of VCs, by the way, say, find a lead and then we're in. And then they look for Union Square, first round or whatever. You have a great lead. And of course, now we're in, right? And so really take somebody with some conviction to lead when there's nobody else at the table. And so that's what we do. We lead, we'll co-lead, we'll fill out the round with other investors. But something to understand is, as you go through the process of sort of pitching, you have the top 10 investors that you want, and you've already vetted them and that they do your type of deals in your sector. They're partners that would be add value, and they do your stage, and you've ranked them, the top one that you want, and then the 10th one, right? And so my advice to you is sort of start at the bottom, or maybe even add 5 more, beyond that, and start at the bottom and work your way up, because you're going to learn a lot through the process as you're pitching, and you don't want your very first pitch, oh my God, I got a pitch with my top investor Genacast, woo. And so I'm going to go to them first. No, you want that to be the last one that you
start with
pitch, Matt. Right? Yeah, you start with Matt. Right? Because you're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn a lot, and by the time you get to the top, to the one that you want, then your pitch is honed. You know all the questions that they're going to ask. You have it down pat. Your deck has probably gone through 100 different versions. And by the way, so I'm, my fellow panelists will not like this, but I'm fine with you just pitching anybody, right? Even if they're not in the sector or not, it's going to be a waste of their time, but who cares? I mean, they're VCs. They do this for a living, right? But you'll definitely learn something from it. It won't be a waste of your time when you pitch somebody, right? So pitch as many people as you can, but save the ones you really want money from till the end, after you've pitched 20 other people.
So a couple points. So tactically, just to answer the question, we will lead like a $500,000 round, but to Matt's point, it doesn't make sense for us to lead $1 million round because we're going to write a $150,000 check. It just doesn't make any sense, but we're happy to lead a smaller round. But I want to talk a little bit about the whole like piggybacking effect and we'll go get a lead. I do think that investors hate to say no, and I think that it is on it's on your shoulders to kind of force us away from the maybe. And I do think that it can be like a gentle way of saying, like, I'm not really interested to go find a lead, and then 2 months later you find a lead and like they're still not interested for a different reason, and that wastes a lot of your time. And so I do think that you guys should be pushing, like when you hear a maybe, like be like, okay, is this really a maybe? Is this really like we're too early, which is like our favorite way to say no? Or is there really something there, like if I come back in 2 months, like what milestone do you want me to hit in 2 months for you to really be interested? Because you do not want to go back to an investor like 8 times and they keep saying, oh, maybe, do this, do that, do that. Try to get people to say a yes or a no. It's hard to do, but it'll save you a lot of time.
I'm going to create a little dissension in the panel. So I do think you can totally lead with a really small check. I am in the process of leading a $3 million round with a $300,000 check. I led the Gotenna round of $1.8 million with a $250,000 check. For that, I will put down terms. I will give a term sheet. You might not like the price that I put down the term sheet, but until you fill out the rest of the round, I'm not going to negotiate against myself, right? And so I'm literally just doing this with a team now, where they were trying to raise $2 million. I really liked the deal. I gave them a term sheet, and I said, you could do a couple of things. Like, you can take this term sheet around to people and say, we have a lead. I didn't give them a great price on it, so that's the problem, is that, like, if they could say they have a lead, but then they have to tell everybody else what the price that I gave them to. So it's a little bit of a balance, right? Like, do you think you can get a better term sheet from somebody else, which is fine, go out and say that, but you might also get the feedback of, like, you know, is there anybody leading, or come back to me. And so do you care more about dilution, or do you care more about time? If you cared more about time, you might take that price or attempt to negotiate with me and all that sort of stuff. I call that the flypaper term sheet, where you've got all these investors buzzing around who like might want to come in, and I'm like, okay, here's some terms, just send them this. It does take a lot of wrangling. So ideally, if you can get somebody to do a majority of the round, like that's always easier. But I'm happy to try and help in that process. There is no official definition of what a lead is. So a lead doesn't have to be the person who writes the biggest check. They don't have to be a person who hands you a term sheet. I've gotten term sheets from startups. Sometimes they're kind of bullshit. Like, oh, here's the term sheet. It's $10 million pre, and we haven't launched the product yet. I was like, no, that's your ask. My bid might be something else, and I'm not going to get you there on that. But when somebody comes in and says, hey, this is 1 on 4, we're taking 20% dilution, it's the standard Series Seed docs, it's been vetted, most times I'm like, all right, that sounds pretty reasonable, we'll go with that. But if you come out with that safe note thing with a pre of 20 or whatever, like, I'm not accepting that as the term sheet.
We kind of jumped ahead from figuring out how to find capital to what our term sheets should look like. What about when we pitch? What are those top 3 things that you guys look at? Top 4, top 2. Like what should these folks here be making sure that in those first 10 seconds, first 30 seconds, they're getting across to you?
If anyone's ever heard me talk about pitching, I've probably used this example a million times before, but there's only one entrepreneur I know that has ever completely run the table at a seed round, like literally not had a no as a first-time entrepreneur, and that was Chantel Waterbury from Chloe and Isabel, who raised a $3 million round on a PowerPoint and was pre-product and had not a single investor turn her down. And all the things you hear about, female founders and it becoming more difficult or whatever, well, how did she do that? The number one thing is that she knew her audience. So Chloe and Isabel is a direct sales jewelry company that basically the differentiator is their online component. I don't know anything about jewelry, so don't come in telling me about like why your jewelry is better, or about the style, your taste, or all that sort of stuff. I can barely dress myself. Like, I'm not the right person for that pitch. she's pitching mostly guys who want to make a lot of money. So her pitch was essentially, have you ever heard of Stella and Dot? No? Well, they went from 3 to 30 to $110 million of revenue in 3 years. And we're like them in these ways, but better than them in these ways. I was like, what? I'm sorry, what company was that like got to $110 million of revenue in 3 years? Yeah, I want to know about that. Like, now I care about jewelry because you just told me it's a way to make a shit ton of money. And so I'm like now listening. But that was her opening line, basically. And she then walked me through all the things about the space. And I literally had no idea where to go to do due diligence on this. I tweeted out, does anybody sell Stella and Dot jewelry? And Anne from Floodgate, a great venture capitalist and a great fund, direct messaged me back, and she's like, what the hell are you doing? Like, what are you even doing in this market? I said, well, I just got this pitch from a founder. She's like, I love this market, but the problem is A, B, and C. And I was like, okay, that was totally the pitch that I just got. And Anne and I co-led that deal when I was at first round. So so many people come in and pitch and don't tell me how they're going to make me money. That's what I do for a living. They'll tell me all this stuff about, all these trends and all this sort of stuff, and I'm left like, I don't understand how there's going to be a lot of money here.
So a lot of investors will break it down into pitch the team, pitch the market, and pitch the product. I would say and I'm sure you guys have all seen like the 10 slides every pitch deck should have, so I don't want to go over that. But in terms of mistakes that I'll often see entrepreneurs make, I think entrepreneurs focus too much on pitching the product, right? Which is like, what's the widget, what's the thing, what's the app? And that's great, but I want you to pitch the company around it. So I'll give you an example. There are probably 10 companies right now that are like open table for beauty appointments, right? If I tomorrow want to get a manicure at 3 o'clock in Columbus Circle, I can do that on about probably 10 different sites that I've seen. There's probably more, right? And I see over and over again founders that'll spend like 8 of the 10 slides pitching the product. I get the product. It doesn't take that long to figure it out. I care about the business model around it. So I'll contrast 2 companies that pitched me on this. One company was like, we're much more doing like a B2C model, and we're going to go after customers, and you refer a friend, and then like I get $10 off a manicure, then you get $10 off a manicure, right? The other company was like, we're going to partner with the back-end appointment system that salons use. And so that every time I onboard or I partner with one of these appointment systems, we onboard 1,000 salons. Vastly different business models, and that's what I care about. And I just see way too many companies pitching the product and not pitching the business around the product. That, and give us a sense of the terms of what you're looking for. Like, are you raising 250? Are you raising 5 million? And like, I see stuff all the time where I'm like, I have no idea what stage you're in, and that makes it much more easy to know if like it's a fit for us or a fit for someone else.
I'm assuming for the moment that you're going to build an awesome product and it's going to be great. You get that credit, that checkbox. I want to know everything around it. Like, are you solving a real problem? Do you know anything about the space? Tell me about the competitive landscape. How much money are you raising, and what are the milestones you're looking to hit over that period of time? So that's basically what I want to see. On the negative side, so I often go into a pitch, and somebody will be in like super duper sales mode. Well, they're like speaking really fast, going slide to slide, and they're just whizzing by, and it's for me, at least my style, it's more of a conversation, right? So I spend my living writing checks. I want to write a check. When we jump on a phone or we start a meeting, the reason why I invited you in is because I'm in love with your company, right? Now, most of them by the end of the meeting I will have fallen out of love, but I start in love with the company. It's like, wow, that it's really interesting because I've read something about it, right? And so I'm going to tell you in that meeting there exactly the issues that I have. If you listen to the questions, I'll say, how big a problem is that? And I'm worried about market size. Or I'll ask you, I think I saw a few other companies that are doing something exactly like that. Worries about competitive landscape. right? So if you make it a conversation, I will tell you the areas that I have questions about. And then finally, the end of the call or the meeting is not, the purpose of that meeting is not for me to get out my checkbook, right? The sole purpose of that meeting is to get a second meeting. That's it. That's the only reason, right? So you have to pique my interest just enough for me to say, you know what, I want to learn a little bit more, right? That's it. And so if you've done that and you get to the second meeting, then obviously the second, you want to get a third meeting and a fourth, and then finally after a number of meetings, then the check is written.
In a way, dissent, but also sort of agree. I'll do both of those things. Our number 1, 2, and 3 thing for us are product. So, when I think about the number of companies we've invested pre-product, when I look at 2015, there was 1 out of 16 or 17 companies that was pre-product, and we knew the founder really, really well, and so product. So and he sort of very clearly and crisply articulated exactly what he wanted to solve. But the companies that we invest in, the areas that we invest in, are ones where we try to find ones where the best product, including distribution, are the products that win in the market. So there's a whole bunch of businesses. I've started businesses where I thought that was true. It turned out not to be true. You walk in once by yourself and you're trying to sell this thing, and they say no, and you walk in once with like the salesperson who had lunch with them last week, and all of a sudden it's a yes. Like, that's not an industry where necessarily the best product wins. Sales is really important there. How customer acquisition, like what direct customer acquisition for companies that, if you have a tutoring company and are you selling to the parents of the kid? Like if you're McDonald's, are you selling it? You're actually like, who's driving that car? It's like the kid's driving the car to McDonald's. Like, and so for us, we very much focus on product. The way that I will agree though is back to kind of the selling thing. Like, so much of selling is listening and understanding what the person across from you cares about. And so for all of us, we've just articulated what the things are we care about. They're all different. So if you can get a sense of that before and during the conversation, I think you end up in a better place, either with really good feedback on why it is or isn't something exciting, or hopefully with that next meeting.
So basically, it's not about product, it's about product. It's not about marketing, it's about marketing. But to Matt's point, I think that's spot on. And sometimes it depends. So we don't have too much more time for the panel, but I did want to address one gigantic elephant in the room. So the stock market contracted approximately 20%. Bill Gurley, very famous venture capitalist, wrote a whole bunch of tweets, but one of them was blah, 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 blah. We may be nearing the end of a cycle where growth is valued more than profitability. We could be at an inflection point. This kind of reminds me of the Sequoia 2008 Rip Good Times tombstone deck, which, for what it's worth, was the perfect time to invest in all these companies. Can you guys, not to conclude on the most sombering note, okay, you talk a little bit about how the broader market impacts not just how you're looking at things, but how you think about your portfolio, how you think about your use of capital for your existing portfolio companies, for new investments, et cetera.
I love investing in down markets, right? So my two first exits were investments that I made in 2008. So
it was the anti-Sequoia portfolio.
I'm the anti, yes. Long live down markets. You have to look at our windows, our horizons are much longer than the current market, right? If we were looking to exit a company today, yes, I'd be really worried. But we invest in companies that will be ready for acquisitions in 4, 6, 8 years. And so hopefully the pendulum will have swung back over that period of time, and companies will have grown through that period of time. So that's one. So investing in down periods, great. We buy low, we sell high. Market's low now. Get into companies when they're ready to be acquired. Hopefully it's higher. So that's one. Two is, in a down market, all major companies are hunkering down, and they're probably not spending in R&D. And so when it comes time where the growth period and the markets turn around, they might look like they might look for M&A as a way to jumpstart their lack of R&D over the past year. So acquisitions, could be up. And third, most important is that if you're an entrepreneur and you're crazy enough to start a business in a down market, I want to speak to you, right? So when there are storms out there, right, and instead of taking your ship into safe harbor, you're out there, fighting all of this and starting a company. It's a certain hardiness that I think entrepreneurs need, and I like that. And if your company, at an early stage, if your company can't find customers in a down market, and you can't grow through a down market, then your market size is probably very small, or it's too specific, because you should, even in a bad market, be able to find your first 10 or 20 customers. You might not be able to find your 1,000 customers, but you should be able to find people who have a need for your product, even when the markets are down.
I do want to use your quote, the hardiness of an entrepreneur for starting something in a down market at some point.
Yeah, I think if you look through the last couple of cycles, what happened in the late 90s was actually a fundamental tech problem that we had sort of gotten over our skis, and there were a lot of tech companies whose customers were also other tech companies, and it was sort of this little bit of House of Cards effect. What happened in 2008 was actually sort of a financing bubble in the fixed income markets, some currency stuff. The underlying fundamentals of technology were actually pretty good. We were on the verge of this revolution in mobile, and so we pretty quickly recovered from that one. September of October of 2008 sucked, and fundraising pretty much sucked up until the end of the next summer. Foursquare raised their seed round in July of 2009. So it was really this 9-month window where it was really tough to raise financing. And if you think about the way that venture funds work, we get fundraising, we get funds to invest every 3 to 4 years. So the angel market might be tougher in this kind of market, because you're literally asking someone to take money out of their guaranteed fixed income account or whatever, put into your startup. But for us, we have capital to deploy, and we might get a little slower, take a little more time on a decision, but by and large, VC funds don't wait that long to deploy capital. So they might take a 4-year fund and stretch it out into a 5-year fund, but eventually they're going to put the money to work at some clearing price. So the thing I would be careful about if I were a seed, if you were looking for a seed round, maybe take money at a little bit of a lower valuation, because you might need an extension. And when your post money is up near 10, asking somebody to put a little more money in next summer when the economy's a little iffy might be difficult, but if you kept that valuation reasonable and made a lot of progress, it's going to be a lot easier.
My comment is sort of about if I were in your shoes, if I were starting a company now, I think the last thing I would worry about is the state of the economy, or even pitching investors. I think the first thing is just building the company for the customers, and I think every question that an investor is going to have is going to be a function of that. If it's a social network, it's what's the user engagement? So your customers are at that point your users. Are they using it a lot? Stock market doesn't necessarily matter. If you're a coder, you just go home and you keep coding it and you keep trying to make the product better. If it's a physical product that you can actually sell, then a lot of the investment, I think, is going to be about sort of growing it and doing it faster. But there's a whole bunch of companies there's a whole bunch of data that you can show. You can start your business very, very capitally efficient, to the point where all of these things are consequences of having made your customers happy, and not consequences of the stock market, not consequences of sort of valuations being high or low. I don't know. I feel like what I would focus on, regardless of the state of the market, is just my users or customers.
On that note, I would like to thank Gil, Matt, Angela, and Charlie.
AWS Loft Talks.